Hello and welcome to the Women at the Top podcast, our author interview series. My name is Regina Barr and I will be your host today. And I'm so excited to tell you that I have joining me Dr. Carrie. And Dr. Carrie is a speaker, author, and psychologist, but don't be intimidated by that. And today, after 21 years in private practice, Dr. Carrie is going to bring us easy to implement strategies to empower, change, improve productivity, and decrease conflict. So welcome to our podcast today.
Thank you so much, Regina. I'm really happy to be here.
Yes, and I'm really excited because you and I had the opportunity to speak about 3 years ago, and that was on emotional intelligence, which is something that I have a passion for too. And we talked about how you could use emotional intelligence to reduce stress. And here we are 3 years later. So I would tell you, maybe Chris will, I'll have my assistant Chris find that old podcast and kind of repost it so people could take a look at that too. So today we are here actually to talk about your book. And I don't know if people can see it if I hold it up a little bit. It's called Self-Help on the Go, because you are not broken, but life gets tricky sometimes. And boy, it sure does. So tell us, what inspired you to write Self-Help on the Go?
So this is the book my clients asked me to write. They kept coming in and very generously would hand me their 200 or 300 page self-help book on one topic. And they would say, I don't want to read 200 pages about why I get angry when my boss is a jerk. I just want to know what to do the next time my boss is a jerk. And there are all of these different things I've been using in practice for a very long time. Lots of them actually are clinically proven, research-backed. They're techniques that are easy to use, easy to implement, but they span across a variety of different problem areas. And so Self-Help on the Go, very different than a traditional self-help book. First of all, it's not going to promise that if you apply the techniques that your life will become perfect, because that's not true.
Lives in that world, right?
It seems like a lot of people.
I don't live in that world. So if that makes anyone who's watching or listening feel better, there you go.
And also, we are going to focus on how you're broken. We're going to assume that just like everybody else, you have strengths and weaknesses and tendencies towards things that really are great, and maybe sometimes some tendencies towards things that aren't necessarily the best. And 10 different topic areas, all of the common problems that we tend to get mixed up in. And for each topic area, we have around 10 tips in each of the topic areas. And most of the 10 are things you can use right away. Every now and again, it's a longer term practice, but most thing it's literally like, hey, my boss is being a jerk. How do I communicate better? Turn to the chapter on communication. You have 10 ideas about what you can do in the moment to handle that conversation well.
I think that's great. And I have to tell you, when I was preparing for our conversation today, I was looking through the book and reading up on some things, and I was pleasantly surprised to find that there are some practices that I'm already employing. And then it was nice to see some other alternatives that I could try out. So I'm a lifelong learner, so I love to learn new things. And speaking of new things, one of the concepts, and I've not heard this before, you talk about the concept of psychological flexibility. And I'm thinking that sounds like something that would be pretty good to have. So tell us, what is that? And then how can it help those listening or watching today actually improve or decrease their stress levels?
Absolutely. So, and decreasing stress is so critical, both for our mental health and our physical health, and just to make life more fun. But psychological flexibility is a fancy name for a very basic concept. And the concept is that if we are working with the reality that we actually have, not the reality we want, not the reality when we lose the 10 pounds, not the reality when, we need something to happen or to stop happening, but when we're actually working with the reality that we have, that gives us more choices and more flexible options. So I can tell you a story if you'd like an example.
Yeah, let's have a story, because, I think most of us are probably familiar with be present, be in the moment. So I would love to know a little bit more about a story that just, showcases the reality that we have.
And this takes it beyond just be present. Being present is a piece of psychological flexibility, but a huge piece of it is also then working with the reality that you do have. So it's doing an assessment of what's going well and what's going badly, and then moving forward from there instead of just getting hijacked by emotions and reacting impulsively. So a couple of weeks ago, my husband and I went on a trip to San Diego, which I don't know if anybody's been to San Diego lately, but I find it like one of the most pleasant places on the planet, right? You're outside all the time. The weather was amazing. It was warm. It was, 30 degrees, and we got 8 inches of snow at our house in Denver while it was 65 degrees, and we're walking on the beach in San Diego. It was great.
And then you probably felt hot. Hey,
Which was a fabulous feeling. But we got a rental car, right? And driving the rental car, and it was really a choppy drive. And I was kind of at a place where I was like, man, like I just not know how to drive a different car? Like, what is going on? This just feels so weird. And all of a sudden, about a quarter of a mile before we're getting to the place where we're staying, there is a box on the windshield, literally about this big, like a 3x3 box. And it says, I can't remember if it said total or complete, but it's some very alarming word like total. And then the next two words are vehicle and malfunction.
oh boy.
And then all of the other lights on the dash go on. Every warning light on the dash is illuminated. And then there's this box, and it feels like the car is like a car that's about to run out of gas. Oh my gosh. So we fortunately are very close to where we're going to be staying. We pull over, we get the car parked. I take a picture of the thing. I call the rental car company. And now I'm running into expectations, right? Like I have an expectation that when I rent a car, it's going to work. I have an expectation that when I'm on vacation, I'm going to get to be on vacation. I also have an expectation that when a rental car doesn't work, that they will bring me a new one. Turns out all of these expectations, while lovely, none of them are true. Right? And so then this is where psychological flexibility comes into action. Am I going to have a tantrum? Am I going to yell at the person on the phone? Am I going to have a meltdown? Am I going to feel sorry for myself? I have all of these options. I also have the option to just work with what is. And what is that I have a car that doesn't work, that I'm not willing to continue driving, because what happens if the total vehicle malfunction actually ends up shutting off the car, right? And end of the day, I get to work with what is, even though my expectations are over here, reality's over here. And a lot of times we'll spend so much time trying to get back to where we want things to be. And then we're at war with what is. And that shoots our stress chemicals up, shoots our stress levels up, decreases our critical thinking, and leaves us feeling really upset. So the answer is work with what is. What is? I'm going to spend a couple hours dealing with a rental car issue. Okay. I hop in the tow truck. Turns out when a tow truck driver brings a malfunctioning car back to the rental car company, they don't bring it back to where I need to be to get the new car. They bring it to a different place. And the person who owns the wrecker yard looks at the tow truck driver and says, "You brought her with you?"
It's funny.
Right? And
Instead of
so
like
again,
dropping you somewhere. That's funny.
but then once again, I get an invitation. How do I want to respond?
Right.
We're going to take a breath. We're going to say the words out loud. Well, I'm here. Any chance you can help me get to the rental car place?
Yes, exactly.
Work with the reality you have.
Yeah,
Manage the emotions that are coming up.
I think that's great advice. And so I hope that those watching or listening could practice some psychological flexibility. I'm just chuckling as well because I had a similar situation happen when I was in Dallas with a rental car. And I call Dallas the Matchbox car city because of all the ramps. And if you've ever driven there, it's a nightmare. but I did manage to stay calm and got myself off in a construction area. And
Uh-huh.
I didn't panic. I just, like you said, I worked the problem that I had,
Yep.
and I actually figured it out and got myself back on the highway and made my
Yep.
plane. So all good. So, I want to talk a little bit about something that you said in your book. And I have a statement that I'm known for, I use all the time: dream big, take action, make it happen. And I felt it was kind of similar but different to something that you say, which is hold hope, empower with tools, and move forward and enjoy life. Tell me a little bit about, why is that statement important to you?
Oh my gosh. And I loved how our mottos overlapped. I was really excited when I was reading yours and I was like, "Oh my gosh, there's a lot of overlap." So, holding hope I feel like is part of the primary job when clients come in and they're struggling, right? Most of the time occasionally clients come in who just want to move forward with something and they're doing really well. But lots of times clients come in and they feel like they've gotten the stuffing beat out of them by life, and their level of hope tends to be low. And so it feels like one of the gifts that I can give them is to hold hope for them and then reflect it back to them. And then teaching tools, right? Because at the end of the day, almost everything is a skill, right? Managing emotions. Secretly, it's a skill. It means you can learn how to do it better. Everything from playing the cello to not blowing up when you're upset, those are all skills. So if we have tools, which we have lots of them, that are really effective, let's empower people with tools. And then the point is to move forward and to not torture yourself by constantly looking back at the past, feeling regret, feeling shame, really overcoming all of that. Moving forward is fabulous. And then you can really enjoy life more. And then even when you're in the midst of a problem, you can have more fun with it. You can be easier going about it, and just makes life. Personally, I think the point of being here is to connect well with others and to enjoy yourself. So, um, suffering is staying in suffering seems like a terrible idea.
I agree with you. I think suffering sounds bad. Let's all avoid it if we can. So, in the workplace, we're talking today primarily to corporate women and others that may be listening in. And the reality is, we all get stressed out. We all feel anxious sometimes. And you talk about in your book about setting boundaries. And I know that we women sometimes can have challenges with setting boundaries. So talk a little bit about, how does setting clear boundaries help when you're feeling overwhelmed?
Well, if you really are clear about who you are and what's most important to you, it makes it a lot easier to then link the actions with it, right? So if I understand what my top values are, then I understand what actions and activities go with that. And then it's easier to communicate to others. I think a lot of times, particularly for women, we will have a tendency to say yes, 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 yes. And then we're overwhelmed and then we are shoving people out, right? Getting sort of so overwhelmed. I was actually having this conversation with a client this week who is in the stage of she's an entrepreneur, in the stage of, never mind, I'm going to sell the business and move to Tahiti, right? And walking through that understanding of like, that's actually not necessarily a thought about moving to Tahiti. That's a thought that reflects that you've taken on more than is reasonable to handle. And so slowing down, getting clear, and then communicating clearly. I'm available for this. I'm not available for that, is a very empowering thing to do for yourself.
Completely agreed. It's interesting because I think a lot of women try to multitask, and we could debate multitasking all day long. Does it work? Is it efficient? But I've been reading a book called One Thing, and I have found that to be helpful for me. In addition to, I have been working on setting some additional boundaries and exiting some things, including boards, committees, and things that don't serve me well anymore. That, sometimes we keep doing things because we can or we're good at it. And I've been really rethinking some things. Before we got on live today, you and I were talking about, sometimes we hit a tipping point that causes us to reevaluate things. So, um, I really have found that we're more empowered than we would like to believe. And I have
Yes.
been practicing implementing some of those boundaries. So I wanted to talk a little bit about, I think we've all had times where we faced things that maybe didn't go the way we had hoped or planned. And I'm wondering, just in brief, if you could give us a few techniques that could help when something doesn't go our way.
Absolutely. So the first step, and this is going to sound a little bit paradoxical, is to actually accept what's going on. And by acceptance, it's critically important to know that I am not saying approval. So when calamity occurs, acceptance is not saying, oh, I'm so glad this happened. This is a piece of why when calamity does occur and people are like, everything happens for a reason, it tends to make people feel more angry than it does soothed because it's too soon to suggest that you approve of the problem. Acceptance is just literally acknowledging, whoa, here is what is real. This is what is. And then you can do an assessment of what portions of this are positive, what portions of this are negative. And if you're in assessment instead of just reaction, if you're in assessment, then you can figure out, you can get more quickly to for a variety of solutions and a variety of options. And that choice is going to help you feel empowered and less hopeless and helpless. Because more than anything, we want to get out of victim mode where it feels like life is happening to us. We want to be the ones making some choices in life while we're also acknowledging the reality of sometimes things happen, right? And so, an easy example, like my rental car thing, right? Like it's a very low emotion example. We can have very high emotion examples. Someone's diagnosed with cancer, you get fired, your company gets bought, and you're laid off, right? Like they can get really big. And the sooner we can acknowledge the emotions that are happening and do an assessment of the actual reality, that acceptance piece is going to help you move forward, just whether it's a small, medium, or a large problem.
Well, that will be something we'll all have to try to work on, the acceptance piece, because I do think um, that's where we create the anxiety. We're not able to accept something, and then we get clouded in our thinking. And then not only can we not assess, but we can't make choices then on a way forward. So then you kind of get into where you're spinning your wheels or just going in a circle, which not usually good for anyone, especially in some of the situations that you just described. So
Well, and a piece of it too is giving yourself enough room to acknowledge how upset you are that what you wanted didn't happen. So instead of telling yourself, like, downgrading the problem, oh, I shouldn't feel bad, people have life worse. It's actually like, it's actually okay to say, I'm really upset about this, because that is a piece of accepting reality, is acknowledging how you really feel.
yeah, I totally agree that accepting and honoring and recognizing your emotions. I feel like I used to have a conversation with my nephew frequently, and we would talk about how you get to feel how you want to feel, and it is okay not to like or accept the behavior of others, because he was struggling with some things that an adult in his life was doing, and it was so hard for him. Um, and I remember trying to tell him it was hard for me too, that this person was creating and behaving in certain ways. And so I remember just thinking to myself, like, wow, I have no idea if I'm helping my nephew by having this conversation, but it seemed to help, right? Just, I think somebody caring and listening and recognizing that. So, well,
Absolutely.
I know that you focus a lot on the concept of joy, and we've got just a little bit of time before we start to wind down. So tell us a little bit about your focus on joy and how this can be a tool for the folks listening in or watching today.
So I don't know about you, but I feel like I'm in my very best self when I'm joyful, right? And when I'm joyful, I tend to be playful, open, easygoing, right? Like the cascade, the waterfall of feelings and experiences that come from feeling joyful is really lovely. And they tend to be the opposite of psychological rigidity, where things have to be one way. It's constrained and small and tight and crisp and fragile. And so when I talk to my clients, and I also talk to myself about how can I purposefully cultivate something that I could really enjoy today. And it doesn't have to be expensive. Sometimes it can be expensive and extravagant. Sometimes it can be as small as drinking your favorite cup of tea for 5 minutes in the middle of a busy day. But to give yourself permission to identify and then actually do the things that make you feel joyful on a pretty regular basis, I strongly encourage it for everyone.
I love that you said that about tea because I am a tea drinker. And that is one of the techniques that I use because us tea drinkers like to brew our tea. So you have to slow down a little bit. And just the process of making it, there can be joy. And then actually enjoying the beverage itself. I also am a big fan of like on Mondays, I try to do like masking Monday where I put a little face mask on for 5 or 10 minutes. Or like the big joke in my house is if I tell my husband I need a spa night and I go up and run a bath, that just doesn't mean I'm actually going off to a spa, but it means I'm going in there. I'm going to spend a little time just decompressing and relaxing. And the code is do not come in. Because when I used to always do that, he'd be knocking at the door, asking me questions. And I was like,
You were
hello, can I have 10
experience.
minutes? Yes. So he knows what it means when I say, you know what? I think I'm going to have a little spa night tonight. He knows that means stay out. Unless the house is on fire or some other emergency, a real emergency, not like where your gray pants are or, something like that. So we are winding down on time. And I always like to ask, about this topic, especially around reducing stress or increasing our mental well-being. What's one piece of advice that you could leave for those listening or watching today?
Absolutely. I think one piece that I would love to leave people with is that this is a process that you need to do deliberately, but it doesn't have to feel huge and like a ton of work. It really can be 5 minutes with tea, 2 minutes outside and let the sun hit your face. It does not have to be huge. It doesn't have to be hard. And you don't have to do it the same way as your neighbor, best friend, husband, wife, whatever. It literally can be like what brings you joy, what decreases stress in your system, and then just deliberately paying attention to doing that.
Well, I love that. So we'll end on a kiss, keep it simple, right? That's what I'm hearing you say. And I want to say thank you so much for being here, Dr. Carrie. It's been fun to visit with you again, and we would love to have you back at another time. And those of you who are listening in, please be sure and check out our events page so you can see what our upcoming podcasts are. On that note, I just want to say have a wonderful day.